that story you were telling me.
Couple boys clock out about 5:35, trying to put a little hammer in their head. Standing in the liquor store staring at a fifth, but they picked up a handle instead. Hell right.
Hell right.
Hell right.
Okay.
Couple girls with their boots on, got their Bluetooth on, t-shirts saying go Sooners. Then the girl from the small town took off the old town, put on a little Hank Jr.
Thank God.
Hell right. She got all her rowdy friends coming over tonight. Hell right. Hell right. Everybody's throwing down on a Friday night somewhere in America. There's a bottle to burn and a fire to light. And you ain't done nothing if you did it halfway. If you're gonna raise hell, then you better damn raise hell right. Hell right. Hell right. There's a guitar on the ground that was making some sound till somebody pulled a hillbilly slip. Now there's fog on the window. She never would have kissed him if he didn't play a lick like this. Hell right. Hell right. Hell right. Hell right. Everybody's throwing down on a Friday night somewhere in America. There's a bottle to burn. Ain't done nothing if you did it halfway. If you're gonna raise hell, then you better damn raise hell right. Hell right. Hell right. Now 7 a.m., damn if there ain't an empty handle on a square hay bale. Everybody's passed out drunk, but when they wake up, they're all gonna hurt like hell right. Yeah, boy. Hell right. Hell right. Everybody's throwing down on a Friday night somewhere in America. There's a bottle to burn and a fire to light. And you ain't done nothing if you did it halfway. If you're gonna raise hell, then you better damn raise hell right. Hell right. Hell
You're listening to Beaufort County's House of Cards on the Big Patriot Radio Network.
Introducing to you.
You're on House of Cards, live on Facebook and YouTube.
It's going down now.
Locked and loaded with the truth.
Tonight's broadcast is brought to you by the fine folks at wethepatriotshop.com/big. Call them up and check out the hormone and steroid-free Black Angus beef. Your barbecue will be the hit of the neighborhood. You can contact them right there at www.wethepatriotshop.com/big or give them a call at 518-538-2877. That's 518-538-2877.
Locked and loaded.
Let's go.
Big Patriot Radio. Blues, news, country pop, and classic rock.
And welcome in, everybody. Glad to have you here on this Thursday evening. You can see I'm not in my normal studio, so we're doing things a little bit different tonight. Probably doesn't sound quite as good as usual, but hey, that's just the way it goes sometimes. Welcome to the show, and wow, what a big show. Did anybody notice, the topic of the show, aside from us having U.S. Congresswoman NANCY MACE on here tonight, aside from that, the rest of the show, if you saw the little logo, it's like a big turd and a lightning bolt. That's right. The political shitstorm is abreast down here in Beaufort County. Before we get going, we want to talk about first the most requested song on BigPatriotRadio.com this past week was Joe Bonamassa and Evil Mama. And the number one listening town was Charleston, South Carolina, along with Beaufort and Waxhaw, North Carolina, however you say that. Those are the top three listening towns this week on BigPatriotRadio.com.
Everything that rocks is right here. Right here.
That's rock.
With Big Patriot Radio.
That's what I'm talking about.
It is. That's what I'm talking about. So our first guest is backstage. She is in the green room, as we like to call it, and we will get to her momentarily. I know we want to keep, we're cognizant of her time, and we'll keep the show going. Wow, where to start? First of all, let me start and say happy anniversary to my mom and dad. 60 years, I believe it is. 60 years today. They tied the old knot back there in West Virginia. So happy anniversary to them. If you have not tuned in to Big Patriot Radio, first of all, what are you waiting for? It's BigPatriotRadio.com. We're heard all over the country and even picking up listeners in Canada. Also, a few overseas, still kind of suspect of that. But BigPatriotRadio.com. Don't forget, every week we have 5 podcasts. Monday night is New America Network or New America Movement with David and Jordan Cox at 7 and 9 p.m. Then on Wednesdays, we have Corey Allen and the Overton Report at 8 and 9 p.m. Thursdays, we're simulcasting this show over to BigPatriotRadio.com like we are right now, worldwide. Saturdays, we have the brand new Ann Ubellis with Southern Sense talk show, radio show out of Beaufort. And then on Sundays, my good friend Andrew Southwick and Culture Crossroads. So please go and check those out. All right, we're going to jump right to it. Our first guest this week, we'll bring her on here in just 2 seconds. She is the current U.S. Congresswoman representing the South Carolina 1st Congressional District. A little bit about her. She was the first female graduate of the Citadel, author of the book titled In the Company of Men. And I had the honor of running against her for Congress. I think it was 3 or 4 years ago now. She is former member of the South Carolina House of Representatives. Please join me in welcoming Nancy Mace to the show.
How are you,
Nancy,
sir?
How are you?
I'm doing well, and happy anniversary to Mom and Dad. It's my parents' 60th anniversary tomorrow.
Wow.
Saturday. Saturday. We're going out for dinner with my family a Saturday night for their 60th anniversary.
How about that? I think I'm out of the area at the moment, but I think we're doing something this weekend too. So we'll see. So happy anniversary to them as well.
Yeah. Awesome.
Haven't talked to you in quite a while. How are you doing?
Well, I mean, we're doing well. I mean, DC is a bit of a mess, right? Can't sometimes tell the difference between parties based on what's going on up there. And, we attack our own as well and don't show a unified front. But, if you look at what's happening around the country in Joe Biden's America, this should be the year. I think Biden just lost the election, seeing what's going on all of these college campuses, the violence, the pro-terrorism, terrorist sympathizers and pro-Hamas students, begging for rations from the school that they're destroying. I mean, it's just the anti-Semitism, the Jew hating that's going on. It's really crazy to think that we live in this world now. And as you know, Mike, the Low Country is home to one of the most historic Jewish communities in the country. We had one of the first synagogues ever built was built in the Low Country. Right. And we've got Jewish folks in our community that are afraid to walk out of their house. It's really, really kind of scary.
Did you know that? And I think you're talking about the in Charleston, the church. Did you know that back in the Revolutionary War, there were some folks from Charleston that were Jewish, came to Beaufort and fought at the Battle of Port Royal?
No, I did not know
Yeah,
that.
it's a cool story. There's a
That's really
monument
cool.
marker we had when I was on county council. We had erected for him up by the
Uh-huh.
air station. But
Oh, that's
anyway,
really cool.
yeah.
That's awesome.
I want to be cognizant of your time. I know you're super busy, so just had a couple
Uh-huh.
things. Wanted to bring you on and let folks hear from you.
Of
And
course.
we're broadcasting all over the country right now. And wow, this show is heavy tonight. We've got people on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook. Nancy, you've got 2 terms under your belt. How
Mhm.
does it feel now that you're running for a 3rd term?
Well, I mean, it feels good, and I think, we've accomplished so much for the Low Country. I work 7 days a week, but we often don't tell everybody what we're doing, and in fact, this reelection, especially as we're out door knocking and phone banking, hearing from people that we've been serving for 3 years, 3.5 years now, hearing their stories of success, and it could be like, "Hey, we got you an appointment at the VA, but it was life-changing for us," or, "You helped my daughter with breast cancer," or "You helped me get an IRS refund." And, 'cause we often pay attention to what's going on in the news and who we see on the news. And we have our own, ability to talk about national topics of interest. But for me personally, growing up in the Low Country, raising my family here, it's really what goes on locally that matters the most. And so we juggle that. We want to be an important voice on national federal policy, but at the same time, we want to make sure that we're making a difference in the lives of every low country listener that you have,
Yeah.
Mike. And it's a lot of work to do that. And I love doing it, and serving the Low Country is the honor of my lifetime.
Nancy, you've come a long, long way from that 12-inch strip of duct tape.
Yeah.
And I think maybe there's only a few people that know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And if you want to retell that story, that's
Yeah.
great. What do you attribute it to, coming from a 12-inch piece of duct tape to a sitting member of the U.S. Congress?
Well, some days I have to pinch myself because I can't believe that I'm here and I'm doing this job. I mean, as you mentioned, my first job was at a Waffle House. I dropped out of high school at 17, and my parents said, "If you're going to stop going to school, you have to start going to work." And I got to work as a waitress. While it was part of my journey working at the Waffle House, it was not my destination. And I spent a lot of time working hard to get to where I am today. I became the first woman to graduate from the Citadel, the Military College of South Carolina, 25 years ago. And in fact, I will be the Citadel Corps of Cadets commencement speaker on Saturday. It's a huge, I think, milestone, I know, in my life personally, to think that 25 years ago, I was just this young girl who didn't really know a lot about the world, but I was tough as nails. And I knew that if I could make it at the Citadel, if I could make it there, I could make it anywhere. And here we are in Washington, beating up the establishment on a daily basis, because I'm not going to be a puppet to the DC elite, and will
Right.
continue to be a really strong conservative and independent voice for the Low Country.
Well, let's talk just a little bit about DC and the Low Country. I wanted to ask first you about the possibility of base closures.
Hmm.
As you know, First Congressional District has many installations, and
Hmm.
I'm a little biased, I guess, but I think the most historic, at least in my purview, is Paris Island.
Yep.
Are we, collectively in the First Congressional District, in any real danger of having bases brought into the conversation of base realignment?
We are not anymore. Under the former Congressman Joe Cunningham, Paris Island was mentioned in the NDAA when he was elected, as being on the chopping block. And when we discovered that in the NDAA in 2020, the very first bill that I filed when I got sworn into office in January of 21 was a bill to protect Paris Island. And I was joined by Joe Wilson and Ralph Norman and Jeff Duncan, William Timmons, and the rest of the South Carolina delegation to make sure that Paris Island does not shut down. And you have these climate activists that say, "Oh, well, there's rain, and if it floods, well, we just can't have a base here." Well, that's not really the case. And so I spend time meeting with different military leaders, obviously at Paris Island every year, talking about their resiliency. They're doing a fantastic job between Marine Corps Air Station Beaufort and Paris Island. We just cover so much ground in Beaufort County for our Marines, both the ones that we train and we make, because Beaufort County makes Marines at Paris Island, but all the pilots that come through. I toured some F-35s just last week, actually. And so we want to make sure that our military bases have all the support and resources they need. And Parris Island is a huge shining star of all the installations in the country, one of the most historic, but one of the most effective as well.
Let's kind of change gears a little bit and talk about the border.
Mm-hmm.
Our border, as you well aware, it's open. It's been open and continues to remain open under the Biden administration.
Mm-hmm.
Even though that open border, 1,000 miles away or a little bit more from the beaches of the first congressional district, it does have a direct effect on us here in the Low Country. So my question would be, what are you, maybe not you specifically, but you in Congress doing, including the governor, to ensure that, South Carolina is not being sent bus loads or airplane loads of illegals with drugs and gangs and all that business?
Yeah, I mean, you look at Beaufort County and, MS-13 gang members have been arrested in the Low Country. We've had human trafficking in my hometown of Goose Creek 3 years ago. There was a human trafficking bus with 28 people arrested. 2 years ago in Somerville, South Carolina, over 20 people were arrested due to a sex trafficking ring. Fentanyl is here. I didn't know what fentanyl was 10 years ago. I knew 2 people to die of a fentanyl overdose just last year alone. And so it's really scary and really crazy what's going on. But every town has become a border town. Number one, I want to say that I'm endorsed by Donald Trump, the guy who literally built over 500 miles of wall. So we obviously support the wall and have done so. We supported HR 2 last year and voted for it. We supported the Homeland Security bill with border security. We just had another border bill that we voted on. We have our own border legislation. I did a bill a few weeks ago called the Violence Against Women by Illegal Aliens Act. So if you are here illegally, you rape or assault a woman, you got to go, like immediately deport. We are sending you home. Get out of the United States of America. And my opponent, on the other hand, is lying to voters and saying that I support open borders, which nothing could be furthest thing from the truth. The fact of the matter is I vote against all the massive mega spending by Republicans and Democrats alike, like omnibuses, like continuing resolutions. I won't be part of that either, but that doesn't mean I don't support the wall when I've actually voted in favor of the wall. I just want it paid for without increasing taxes or adding to the debt or the deficit, and that's responsible. And the other thing I want to say too is, as people are listening, my opponents put a lot of lies out there, and my opponent, Catherine Templeton, fired 85% of immigration enforcement agents when she worked for South Carolina government. So you can't say you're serious about immigration when you fire your immigration enforcement agents, like almost all of them. Like I can't even make this stuff up. And we also have an endorsement from Larry Grooms, who wrote the toughest immigration bill in the nation as a state lawmaker, a bill that my opponent, Catherine Templeton, is desperately trying to take credit for, a bill that somebody else wrote. But we have a really strong record on the border. It's something we have to take care of. I support Governor McMaster in all of his efforts and endeavors to shut things down and make sure that we don't have illegals coming into the state of South Carolina. They don't stay here. They got to go somewhere else. They better go back to their home countries.
Absolutely. And, if you happen to have seen, like last night, they had extensive coverage of what was going on at UCLA. With the city. And what I find ironic with that, well, as I was watching, they had a wall. They had a wall built. These far left, out of the ditch, the fringe group built a wall, and I found that a little interesting,
ironic. I mean, these are idiot incubators. These elite leftist universities are idiot incubators. They are not raising and teaching our finest. And I would like these kids to go over to Gaza in their crop tops with their nose rings and their pronouns and their terrorist flags and wave them around and see how long they last, because Hamas will cut off their heads and throw them off a roof before they can give them their proper pronouns, right? Absolutely. I mean, that is essentially what would happen to them. And it is shocking. It's ridiculous. Joe Biden gave a speech today about the violence on college campuses and could not be compelled to condemn terrorist sympathizers on college campuses today. This is Joe Biden's America.
That's right. That's right. The number one issue that I'm hearing, maybe you are as well. I'd like to hear what your take on that is. But from folks around my area of the first congressional district is the economy. The economic situation is horrible. Grocery bags, it seems like, before the conversation was, hey, how many bags can we get for $100? Now it's every bag is $100. That's not good. Don't try to buy a gallon of milk. I'm not even going to talk about gasoline. Everything has gone up in price, and in my opinion, getting rid of the Biden administration is crucial in that endeavor. But possibly, and I'd love to hear what you think about this, even more so is a GOP majority in the Senate and keeping the House. How is the outlook as far as that goes in your mind for Congress? And will that help alleviate some of this exacerbated costs that Americans are going through?
Well, when the lawfare started with Biden trying to throw Trump off the ballot, Biden basically nominated Trump last year. And now what I see with the violence on college campuses, I believe that Biden just elected Donald Trump as president. And if that happens in November, then I believe we will be able to keep the House majority despite our best efforts to lose it, given the lack of spine and backbone on the border that we're seeing today, because we should have done border security with Ukraine and we didn't do that. But that's another conversation for another day. But and then I think we have a big chance to flip the Senate. And look, Donald Trump is up in 6 of the 7 swing states right now. He's doing a very remarkable job. And what we're seeing with these Antifa thugs and these misguided terrorist sympathizer students right now promoting violence on campuses, it's going to get worse before it gets better. And I believe that this is only increasing our chances of winning in November, winning it all, because the left has no limits. They won't put a stop to this. They won't put their foot down. They are anti-Semitics. And you're seeing a lot of folks in our Jewish community, including in the Low Country, who don't traditionally vote Republican, saying, wait a minute, I didn't vote for this guy last time, but I'm going to vote for him now because he's going to keep me and my family safe.
Right. Libby, I'm running out of time, and I want to be cognizant of your schedule. You mentioned you're one of the 2 opponents you have in the primary just a minute ago. And you have the possibility of, when we say a tough primary, I know the one that we were in together, I wouldn't call that tough, but it was a lot of fun. But you have the possibility of a pretty tough one coming up. And then after that, you've got a pair of liberals. I don't know what they're going to eat themselves together, I guess. Let's concentrate on the primary. I'm going to ask, I hope to get both of your opponents on here. Simple question, just one. Why you and not them?
Well, because of everything that I've accomplished for the Low Country. I'm a fiscal conservative that can win a purple district in a general election. If you remember, Mike, the year that we ran against each other, I flipped this seat, but I only won it by 1 point. When the state redistricted the 1st congressional district in 22, they only made it 1 point better. This district is unlike many other districts. It's very difficult, but I understand the district because I grew up here. We're fiscally conservative, we're socially sensible, and we want someone who's going to have a backbone and not toe the party line, either party line. And I've done a very good job of that. I've taken some really tough votes. I've taken some really tough hits, and I stand firm and I stand strong. And, every election is tough. I run through the tape. No one will work harder. But I promise you in this thing, I will always tell the truth. I will always work hard, and I'm not going to lie to you. And I've delivered a lot of results for the Low Country over the last 3 years. And I'm running against a person right now, Catherine Templeton, who has completely lied through her teeth. She has millions of dollars. She's backed by dark money out of DC, dark interests, dark money, the DC establishment. She's just a puppet for Kevin McCarthy. I've seen it on the floor of the House. These puppets, they go to leadership and they ask them how they're supposed to vote. That's what these types of people do. And she won't be a conservative, independent voice. And you look at her record on immigration, firing 85% of your immigration enforcement agents is a really abysmal record when we're being invaded by over 9 million illegals coming across the southern border under Joe Biden. My opponent, Catherine Templeton, also apologized for calling illegals illegal aliens on the same day that Joe Biden did. Like, we don't need a Democrat in Republican clothing in this district. We need a fiscal conservative who can beat the Democrats in November.
What's on the table for Nancy Mace should you win re-election? What's on the horizon in the next term?
Well, to continue the work that I've already started, I have done a lot in the DoD and defense and military space. I sit on the House Armed Services Committee. We're working through the National Defense Authorization Act now, like we do every year. I also serve our veterans on the House Veteran Affairs Committee. About a third of all veterans in the entire state of South Carolina, live in the Low Country. And then on oversight, continuing our investigations into Joe Biden and his family and the corruption and bribery schemes that have been going on and violating the Foreign Agents Act, and also the cybersecurity work that I've done. We have a cybersecurity hub in Beaufort County that we helped get funded. And we want to continue the work that we're doing for our veterans and cybersecurity in the military space and continue to kill it.
There you go. I've got a question from one of our viewers, but my last question, and I ask this of a lot of people. Seriously, are you having fun at your job?
I do love the job. There are days when I sometimes hate it, but hate the people that I work with. But in terms of members of Congress and the BS that happens, obviously, but it's a tough job, but somebody's got to do it. And I love being able to stand up and stand strong against some of these voices. Some of them are just crazy voices. Sometimes it's the establishment, sometimes it's leadership, and trying to do the right thing and showing people that there is absolutely a way. Like I did this bill the other day. It was called the Violence Against Women Act by Illegal Aliens. And it shows how we as conservatives can support the border and be against illegal immigration and support women at the same time. Well, you know what? Jim Jordan loves that bill. Steve Scalise loves the bill. We're working on it through the Judiciary Committee right now because I want to dare Democrats to vote against that bill. And because it's good for women and it's good for those that want to shut down the border. So I love the job.
Awesome. Question from a viewer wants to know, what is your view currently regarding the protesters who were present in Washington, D.C. on January 6th?
I talked about the way that I felt on January 6th. I didn't mince words and, I stand by everything that I said, but I will tell you today, Donald Trump and we've come a long way and he's supporting my reelection campaign. I actually just went down to Miami and spent the day with him in Doral, and we talked about immigration. We talked about the border. We talked about women's issues that are really important to me as a Republican woman. And he has my back and I have his, and we've gotten back together, and I'm working really hard to help him get elected in November, and he's working hard to help me keep the seat.
Fundraising going well. I remember when we ran, you had talked about that a lot.
Yeah.
And actually, when my team decided, they said, look, you're not going to catch Nancy. It wasn't until then it sunk in. But how's fundraising going? I hear it's a little tough for the GOP. It's
tougher now than it has been for the party. But we outraised my opponent in the first quarter by $100,000. I think we did about $550,000 in Q1. That's not easy, especially when fundraising is down overall for the party. And that's what it's going to take to win in November. This seat could easily flip back to a Democrat in November with the wrong candidate who can't raise, who lies about issues, who's a flip-flopper like the last one. That doesn't work here. And the kind of record that we have versus the kind of record my opponent has, it couldn't be a bigger difference. It's night and day. Last thing,
and we'll let you go. You had mentioned earlier about not towing the party line, and I totally agree with that. And a little bit later in this segment, or the next two segments, I'm going to go into that and probably ruffle some feathers. But can you give an example of taking a more conservative view than just towing, the Republican Party line, what the GOP tells you to do? What's a good example?
Well, for starters, on big spending packages. So we had the debt ceiling bill last year. I outlined in an 18-piece thread on social media what was wrong with the bill and why it wasn't fiscally conservative and why the former Speaker of the House lied to the Republican Party, lied to the American people about what was in that bill. It had no limits. It was a debt ceiling bill with no limits. And then also the omnibuses we have had, the continuing resolutions that we have had. Republicans like to spend just as much as Democrats. So when we're talking about the debt that we have today, $1 trillion every 100 days, when we talk about the deficit and the $50 trillion of debt that are going to be on the backs of your children and grandchildren in less than 10 years now, that's a result of both parties. They're both complicit. They are both guilty. And so that's where you really see me catching fire and going against the party, or on these massive spending packages that don't have offsets, that don't have paid fors, that will eventually raise taxes and add to the deficit and put massive amounts of debt onto the future of our nation that we can't afford. And China and Russia and Iran are laughing at us.
Big time. Nancy Mace, ladies and gentlemen, how can people get in touch with you? I take nancymace.org.
Yes, sir. They can go to nancymace.org. They can chip in $1 or $100 and help us beat the establishment and their handpicked puppet in the Republican primary in June.
Nancy, thank you so much. You're always welcome on the show, and we hope to talk to you again soon.
It's good to see you. And happy anniversary to Mom and Dad.
Likewise to yours.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. Nancy Mace coming in to us from
Everything that rocks is right here. Right here.
Let's rock.
With Big Patriot Radio.
That's what I'm talking about.
coming in from parts unknown. Not sure if she's here or in D.C., but glad to have her on here. All right. We have another guest coming on in the 8 o'clock hour, but I want to tell you, before we get to that, we've got a half hour. I can go into this. I want to tell you about a I lost my – I'm only working on one screen this week, so this is tough. I usually have actually 3, this one and 2 others. I want to tell you about, like what we said earlier, a shitstorm that's brewing here in the state of South Carolina, specifically within the GOP. So recently there was an election that was held, and I may paraphrase some things or use a term a little bit different because this has been unfolding rather quickly. So anyway, there was an election held recently to elect folks to be a part of the first congressional district team, legislative voting electoral team to vote, to go to the national convention, voting for delegates and so forth. There's like 6, I believe it's 6, and maybe 6 and 3 alternates or 3 and 3 alternates. I don't know. It's something like that. Anyway, Beaufort County had one. We had one person, young lady, had enough votes. Lauren Martell, noted lawyer at Bluffton Hilton Head, ran a hell of a campaign against Alan Wilson for AG. Spent like only, I don't know, it was like a third of what he did, and she came damn close. Anyway, delegates elections for the RNC. Thanks. Appreciate that. Anyway, a week or so goes by, and I get copies of a letter by Drew McKissick, state GOP, chair, former RNC co-chair till he got booted. Anyway, this letter said that the GOP and the Rules Committee had met. Okay, they have a Rules Committee. They met and found that Lauren Martell, Keith Blanford, and Olga Blanford, they're 2 GOP members in the Charleston County area, found them to be ineligible to be representatives at the state convention. So they couldn't, in effect, go to the national convention because they violated something called Rule 16 of the SCGOP. So let me move in a little bit. We'll come back to the why and what rule did they break. We all know my feelings towards local Jodan Lee of Hilton Head, along with Kevin Henley, but specifically Jodan Lee, and how she has been working diligently to, in my opinion, to subvert the GOP processes in both Beaufort County and at the state level. We have even caught Jodan having a conversation with GOP Director Drew McKissick after the votes were tallied, and she didn't win. That's right. She did not win. She ran for, and I'm going to try to bring up this picture. For some reason, this isn't going to let me. That's not cool. Let's bring this back up here. All right. Well, if it comes back up, I will, like I said, I'm working on a different format. Anyway, we have a picture, a photo of her and Drew McKissick together You could tell they were both, they weren't happy. Okay, they weren't happy. So anyway, now the three, Martell, Blanford, and Blanford, were accused accused of rather, donating to the RFK, Robert F. Kennedy campaign in the amount of $500 each for an event in Charleston in 2023. Now, and let's keep this simple, okay? Let's look at this in simple terms. At that time, there was, and this is their plight, there was no duly elected Republican candidate running for Senate, president. And that's true. There was no duly elected person in that capacity. Donald Trump did not have that at this time in 2023. As best I can tell, that is correct. According to the rules, if there is a person on the GOP ticket and someone does this, donates $500 or donates anything, contributes, I think is the word they use, it's against the rules. I totally understand that. Fair enough. Their statement is, quote, there was no GOP contender at that time. So again, looking at this, I agree with them. Now, there are some documents that I would really like to put up on here, and let's see if I can bring those up here. Oops, you lost me. There we go. All right. First of all, let's bring up. I want you to see this picture that we have here. Let's go here. Bear with me 1 second. We'll get this pointed up here, and come on, where are you? I hate it when a plan doesn't come together. I think you can see that. Everybody should be able to see this picture right here. On the right, that's Drew McKissick with his hand in his coat pocket. That look is a look of perplexing situation. And on the left, that is Mrs. Jodan Lee, who, again, she is contemplating, she's giving him the business, as they say, giving him the business. Not sure what they're talking about. I got a good feeling. So I want to bring up a couple of articles. Let's go to this. You're going to want to see this. So let's go to here we go. So I believe everybody can see this. I believe so. Okay. So what we have here is a letter. And actually, that's not the right one. Hold on 1 second. Let's go back here and let's bring up the right one. Well, I guess it is the right one. All right. Anyway, a letter from Lauren Martell back to the GOP chair, Drew McKissick. In this letter, she is disputing what she calls the erroneous unilateral finding that apparently has tried to ease me or erase me, spelling error, from the list of delegates. She quotes, to quote her, she says that she disputes the intentional, malicious, and wrongful action that violates the rules taken by McKissick and his officers. Anyway, here's Rule 16, Code of Conduct. Any officer, blah, 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 who publicly endorses or financially supports a candidate for partisan office other than a duly nominated Republican candidate, unless there is no Republican nominee in the relevant race, shall immediately vacate the Republican Party office so on and so forth. So that's the rule that they say they broke. I'm going to give you two different sides of that, but let's keep going through this. Ms. Martell explains her legal explanation of the rules. And in the rules, and this is in there, it's Rule 10 under appeals. If there is an appeal, arise in a county party organization or in a congressional district organization, which is what this was, shall be decided upon appeal by the state executive committee, provided that all questions pertaining to this, I can't read that, of the delegates, seating, I think it is, of delegates at all levels shall be determined by the convention, meeting, or body. The rules, Rule 10, says that they can appeal it, but according to what I've read from Mr. McKissick, there is no appeal. They have been told you're not going. Further down in Ms. Martell's letter, she says the state chairman should call a meeting of the state executive committee no later than 2 weeks after the appeal has been filed. None has been called by the state chairman. If you're going to enforce the rules, Drew, you got to play by the rules. I've had conversations today with people on both sides of this, and my deal, if you want to call it that, is, look, I don't have a dog in this fight, but both sides need to play by the rules. I don't care who you are. You play by the rules or you get out of the game. Drew McKissick isn't playing by the rules on this. Now, further down, this is the first congressional district ballot, because you're probably saying, well, what's this got to do with Jodan Lee? Well, I'm glad you asked, because I'm going to tell you. So here's the ballot. This is scanned from that day. The top 3 vote getters will be delegates to the national convention. The following 3 are alternates. All right, that's where I got my 6 from. All right, well, look at this is all the candidates right here. Well, the top vote getter looks to me like it was Stephen Laporta out of Berkeley with 66. Coming in second, Keith Blanford of Charleston with 65. Coming in third, Lauren Martell of Beaufort. That's your top 3. The next 3 looks to me like it's Olga Blanford of Charleston, Peggy Lazanansky of Berkeley, and unless I'm reading wrong, Cynthia Jones of Charleston. Those are the next 3. If you erase Blanford and you erase Lauren Martell and you erase Cynthia Jones, I'm sorry, not Cynthia Jones, Olga Blanford, who are the next ones that get in? Jodan Lee, and I believe it is Kevin Henley. That's interesting. That is very interesting, because they've put out, the Beaufort County GOP put out a letter. Jodan Lee put out a letter. She was having a nice conversation, very intense, with Drew McKissick. And now all of a sudden they're going to skirt the rules because of something that the 3, Martell and Blanford and his wife, did previously. So hold that thought. So obviously Martell and the Blanfords got in touch with the Kennedy campaign, and you can see here, I'll leave it up here just for a second, they're responding to her saying, you became aware that the $500 you paid was considered and filed as a campaign contribution, but it says in here that you weren't aware of this, that it was a contribution. So Kennedy was going to refund the money. That's all well and good. And here is the state saying, hey, here's your refund. Moving on down, here is a complaint. And you can see these things building, okay? Here's the complaint against the GOP, Drew McKissick, and the Rules Committee, and the Beaufort County GOP, Kevin Henley and Jodan Lee. Here's where the shitstorm begins to stink, because Kevin Henley and Jodan Lee have got this this affliction with anybody who considers themselves America first, which is let's be real about it. That's people for the most part in this phrasing are part of my SC GOP. Now, for me, this is not about them. This is about the rules. So Henley and Jodan Lee and Drew McKissick can't stand my SC GOP. Remember Jeff Davis, who I think very little of, he's in that mix. So anyway, now you know all the players that are in this, okay? Jodan Lee and Kevin Henley are in a complaint along with the Rules Committee and Drew McKissick because of letters that had been sent out by, and hey, and again, I'm not taking anybody's side in this because there are faults on both, but I will say that Jodan Lee and Kevin Henley are trying to subvert and perverse the rules along with Drew McKissick, and that's wrong. You can look down through here. This is the complaint. It's very well written, and it spells it out. Rules that they have broken because of these letters. I have one from Jodan Lee. I have one from Kevin Henley. I have one from Drew McKissick. They're out there. And these letters are speculative, as Ms. Martell or whoever wrote this says. Failure to investigate or set a hearing. They didn't do any of that. Now, who is on this Rules Committee? And I knew this was coming, so I wanted to see what this would say. And whoever wrote this is actually spot on. Tom Denny, committee chair. He is a paid lobbyist, allegedly a paid lobbyist. Failed to notify or serve any notice to investigate the issues. He did not do Rule 10. Victoria Cowart, chair of the Berkeley County GOP. She has actively campaigned against Keith and Olga Blanford and Lauren Martell only because she despises, and if she needs to be asked this in public, I will. She despises Jeff Davis. Be that as it may, and I don't disagree, you don't take that out against Keith and Olga Blanford, right or wrong. That's becoming personal. Mark Hartley, Stephen Wright, all these other folks, you see them here on the left-hand column. They're all part of the Rules Committee who have not done their job under Rule 10. Finally, in the complaint, Kevin Henley and Jodan Lee for republishing misinformation, failure to read and set forth the Rule 16C, where it in fact was not violated according to this, and allegations made by the Rules Committee untrue according to this, are deceptive, I agree with, by the Beaufort GOP, and that was just a few days ago on the 28th of April. Yes, the Blanfords, I am, from what I understand, they are going to make another case of this because of some damages, allegedly. We'll see what happens with that. That is signed by Lauren Martell, so obviously she submitted that. Well done, well written document. The rest of this is an official statement by Lauren. A lot of the same thing ad nauseum. Keith Blanford also has a statement. His wife has a statement. There you see it. And we'll just go down here. There shouldn't be much left. The Blanfords also wrote to the Kennedy campaign and said the same thing. We didn't know it was. We want our money back or whatever, and so forth. Now, let's make clear on something. Both Martell and the Blanfords are saying they did not know it was for a campaign. I'll take them at their word. However, it was $500. If you thought that was for dinner and drinks, that doesn't compute. I'm not accusing anybody of anything. Okay. If you say you didn't know, you didn't know, whatever. I'm just saying it's my opinion. And guess what? I'm the only one here, so I get to have it. It's my opinion that I wouldn't cut somebody a $500 check, especially if they were a candidate for office, if they didn't think the same way I do. That's just me. That's just me. I would be careful where I spent money. If, let's just use Nancy Mace as an example. If she called and said, hey, Mike, I'd like for you and Teresa to come by. We've got a big party going on. And by the way, it is $500 a couple, but we got food and drinks and the band. I honestly would expect and suspect that it's for her campaign. Well, they didn't come out and say that. Well, I don't know that you have to. I really don't. So, what is the bottom line of this? I think, in my opinion, it's suspect, and I think it was wrong for the three of them to pay $500 to see Kennedy or go to a dinner or whatever. I think that was wrong. Into that. I think it's wrong that the GOP is taking the stance that they're taking because they're breaking their own rules, as I see it. Kevin Henley and Jodan Lee, with their alleged schemes, are sticking their nose where it doesn't belong. And it's just another reason why Kevin Henley should not be the county chair. And Jodan Lee has zero business being the state executive committeeman, as they call them, for Beaufort County. It's absolutely insane. Now, I've got some more to go, but I want to check, see if I've got any. Jodan should remove herself from the running entirely since she was the complainant. Absolutely, she should. So should Kevin Henley, because he is also in on this, and he's next in line right under her with the number of votes. He's planning on going. Let's see. The state ECs will handle that Saturday. I'm not sure what you're talking about. So are we to believe there were no Republicans running for this office? There were no Republicans declared a candidate at the time of this. That is correct. Right, wrong, or otherwise, that is correct. Did everybody know Donald Trump was going to run? Absolutely. Was he declared the Republican candidate? No, he was not. That just is what it is. And I'm just being totally, brutally honest about it. Let's see what else we got here. No, it is not Jodan and Henley against McKissick. It is all of them, including the Rules Committee and all those members. That's the complaint against all of them. 4A, don't have that in front of me. Let's see. When can a person ask for a refund for campaign donation? Great question, Bo. I don't know that there's an answer to that, but as a politician and someone who's ran for local, state, and federal offices, if somebody wanted a refund, I don't care when it was, I would give it to them. It's the old adage, do you want to win the race or win the war? I don't want to piss somebody off by saying, no, I'm not giving you your $500 back. That I wouldn't do. That's not any way to win friends and influence others. How many times have you gone to dinner and filled out your address, employer, job position, other? Exactly. If you're going to cut a check for $500, you got to think what that's in, and you're going to a Kennedy event. I just don't understand that. But hey, they said they didn't know, so they didn't know. I'm just saying, for me, for my little brain, I'm suspect of that, and I would not do that. I would just not do that. Let's see. Nate, Trump is a good actor, but his actions are closed down the country again. Never forget Trump. Okay. Support Robert F. Kennedy. Hey, that's great, man. Fantastic. So let me go back to this. All right. So we saw the what I call the shit show diatribe there, all that data from Lauren Martell, the Blanfords, and the GOP, Jodan Lee, and all that. So Beaufort County GOP, like I said, they sent out their own letters. Jodan Lee sent one of her own. Lauren Martell sent one out, and I got Blanford's today. They're alleging harming their names by allegedly spreading false rumors. I totally understand that. It's a legal world we live in. I totally understand it. I can't tell you how many people have contacted me about this. And folks, to be quite honest about it, people have finally had enough of Jodan Lee, of Drew McKissick, of Kevin Henley, the Victoria Cowards, others. They've had enough. This is despicable. It doesn't matter. Again, there's stuff in the background that a lot of you don't know about with the Jeff Davis influence and all of that, which is horrible, horrible. I would never associate myself with him again. But that's not neither here nor there. Both sides, I've tried to present, both sides have got problems here, and this needs to be fixed. This needs to be fixed. My biggest thing is that Kevin Henley and Jodan Lee are harming the GOP community. And I'm speaking to Jodan Lee. She is harming the GOP community in Beaufort County and in South Carolina by her divisive, her demeaning rhetoric. On one hand, she goes, and people, I'm a friend of, no, well, I'm sorry. You need to listen to this. You need to understand what I'm telling you. One hand, she goes on camera saying how the party has to be united. Agree. And then on the other hand, she is picking winners and losers herself and expects others to follow. I have been in position or seen videos where she is telling people to unite and don't die on that sword and don't die on that hill. But yet, if you don't believe, you don't agree with me, you're scum. She's doing it right now with Catherine Templeton. She flip-flopped against Nancy Mace and is supporting Catherine Templeton 100% as soon as she put her name out there. How do you do that if you're a so-called officer in the party? That's kind of that's not copacetic. You run a fledgling little club, Friends of Liberty or whatever it is, who makes supportive statements. But the ink didn't dry on Catherine Templeton's paperwork to run for office. Jodan Lee was already making public statements about supporting her, and in her own way, her own special little way, insinuating that if you don't vote the way she wants you to vote, you are of no use to her. That's exactly what it is. And as we have said before, she has even yelled at least at one, probably more, but at least at one, maybe more, not probably, maybe. One county council member that she was doing, she yelled this out in the parking lot. I'm doing everything I will in her power to have him removed from office. That was, and I'm paraphrasing that. What kind of uniter does that? I've had some people say, man, she's not divisive. She put together the election integrity bill. She's a joiner. No, she's not. How she's got people snowballed is unbelievable. She is a divisive, rhetorical. She's got to go. She's got to go. Give me a break, lady. Let's see. There's a couple other things on here. Lynn, a lot of people spend a lot more than $500 to go to a concert and you don't get dinner. Well, that's true. But again, let's take it back into context. Okay. If you cut a check or credit card for $500 and you're going to a Kennedy event, they're not saying that they didn't know it was a Kennedy event. They just said that they didn't know it was a contribution. Maybe they didn't. I'm not accusing them. But they knew who it was for, and he was on, he was an independent ticket or whatever. You have to, I can't understand you not thinking, well, this is for political purposes. Hey, if you didn't, then you didn't. And so be it. So be it. I'm just saying, I'm putting it out there. RFK Jr. is the main person fighting Big Pharma in childhood and COVID vaccines. Why wouldn't you want to go hear him on this? Maybe you would. If there's a republic, but the rules are the rules. Again, I'm playing the rules, not the side of the road. If the rules state you can't do that, and hold the office of or whatever it is, then you can't do that. I mean, that's just is what it is. Now, if you or I, and Lynn knows who I'm talking to, want to go do that, we have every right to do that. I'm not an officer of that group. So you know what I'm saying? I mean, I hope that makes sense. Let's see. Beth, what does Beth say here? So was Rule 16 violated? If not, why were their elected positions taken away? Rule 16, yeah, I had said earlier, the GOP, did not follow the, well, let me rephrase that. Was Rule 16 violated? I don't know. That's not up for me. I'm just saying they gave a $500 donation for dinner and drinks at an event that had Kennedy's name on it. I'm not the one to make that rule. I wouldn't have done it. I can tell you I wouldn't have done it if I was in their position. All right. Anyway, if not, why were their elected positions taken away? They were taken away because the Blanfords and Lauren Martell are part of not an organization. I don't want to say that, but they're associated with some people that Drew McKissick, Jodan Lee, and Kevin Henley, Victoria Cowart, that group despises. They hang, they're the birds of a feather they hang with, so to speak, they despise. That's why it was done. I mean, that's easy pickings. Let's see. Let's keep going here. He was not an independent, whatever, independent Democrat. He was a validated candidate. There was no Republican candidate. Jodan is a problem entirely. The worst part about this, she is the one that made the statement. She was the one who made the statement. That's correct, bud. That's playing big time into why some people are taking certain stances, for sure, and that's why it's important to place principles above personality. I agree with that 100%. 100%. 100%. Okay, so back to the story, and we've got our next guests patiently waiting in the green room. We'll get to them here real quick. This entire thing, ladies and gentlemen, work myself up in the need to drink. This entire thing is yet another example of the dysfunction, complete dysfunction, the apparent alleged illusion of sleight of hand, the mockery of the rules and regulations, albeit from the current leadership of the SCGOP and the Beaufort County GOP. Yes, you can add Berkeley County GOP in there as well as a few others like Lexington GOP and their, I don't know if she's former chair or is still, I don't know, that's a fustercluck, Pam Godwin, who, by the way, is in that same little group Jeff Davis is a part of, and I think zero of her. Think absolutely zero of her. So anyway, what is this, Corey? Is this, in that case, why is the term delegate in Rule 16C? Rule A is a spirit of the rule, not the letter. Well, the problem, to add to that, my friend, is that there are a lack of definitions in law, which they're all trying to play. You have to have definitions at the beginning of any legislation, if you will. What does delegate mean? What does candidate mean? That should have been spelled out. It isn't, that I can tell, and that's too bad. That's too bad. So anyway, what should be done? Well, I don't want to bring a problem and no solution. So, McKissick needs to retract his letters and his statements. He needs to retract all that and move forward with the slate that was elected, and this is even better. And I'm changing my mind on this. He needs to retract those letters, but he needs to go through the rules and regulations of the appeals process. That would be the right thing to do. An appeal was made. The appeal has not been given. That is what he needs to do. Simple, easy. Hey, give the people, a breath of hope and trust that is severely, sorely lost in politics. It's a canker, and people are sick and tired of it. We see it nationally, locally, statewide. Quit the underhanded, backdoor shit. Stop the storm and grow up.
I've been selling my soul, working all day.
Hold on one second. The wrong button. This is what happens when you're away.
All the wickedness and filth this world has to offer.
Rock music that shatters your bones. Big Patriot Radio.
That's some serious rock.
And you're responsible.
All right. Something that we've done over, is it a year and a half? Coming on 2 years. We support, whether it be financially, vocally, whatever, only a few things. And one of those things we support and will continue to support is the fight against trafficking. Human trafficking, sex trafficking, child trafficking, whatever trafficking. There is a group that we support and we love called Fresh Start Healing Hearts. We've had their director on here before. I want to bring Sheila Romeling on back with us. Sheila, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I am good. And I'm also going to bring on, we have someone with you. Let me see how I can do this. There we go. Mr. Healy, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well, Mike, and I hope you are as well.
I am. I appreciate you guys and gals being on here. Sheila, it is always good to see you. It's been a few months. Robert, I haven't met you, but if you're hanging around with this gal, you're okay.
You're right there.
So obviously we're here to talk about some things involving human trafficking. This subject, Sheila, one day I'd like it to be where I call you and say, hey, you want to be on the show? And you go, well, yeah, but there's not much to talk about because trafficking has been stopped. That would be great. But unfortunately, that is not what's going on. Right. You and I were talking the other day briefly. There is a bill that has been introduced in the South Carolina General Assembly last year known as Senate Bill 145. This bill, to the folks watching, does the following. It says, relating to prostitution, lewdness, I don't know how to say that, assignation, whatever, and prostitution generally, so as to increase the penalties for solicitation of prostitution, establishing or keeping a brothel or house of prostitution, or causing or inducing another to participate in prostitution, to establish the affirmative defense of being a victim of human trafficking, and to increase penalties for soliciting, causing, or inducing another for or into prostitution if the prostitute has a mental disability. That's a long way of saying what the definition of this bill. Sheila, it's been through the Senate. It has gone to the House last year where it sets in judiciary. What is going on with this bill, and how do we get some movement with this?
Well, first of all, I would like to, I brought Bob on for two reasons. One, I'm able to articulate better how this affects the survivors of human trafficking and why we need your support and everybody who's listening to get a hold of their representatives and let them know that they want this bill supported, is because, first of all, this bill has not been changed since 1986. That means before cell phones, before all the internet, all the apps, So it is so outdated, and it's got such a low amount added to it for any of the crime at all, that what happens is it gives the law enforcement low priority. So what happens is you have all these survivors or victims, however you want to look at them, that if once they get out of a situation, they just want out, they want to go. They're already beaten down, and their self-esteem is gone so much that you actually want to put them on the stand as law enforcement, but they're gone. They don't want to have anything to do with it. They're out of here. So what happens is you end up with a situation where law enforcement doesn't want to even deal with this, because for one, it costs way more than it costs way more for them to put a group together to attack this situation for prostitution or trafficking, human trafficking, than it would for what the trafficker is getting, which is a $200 slap on the wrist. And so what happens is also right now, the way it stands, if I'm right, Bob, it currently stands with where the victim, which is more now than it used to be back in the 80s, where it was a lot more prostitution, but now we have a lot more human trafficking than prostituting. And so we're trying to separate that out. And that's what this bill is also supposed to help do, is separate it out so that procurement is its own piece. So that means the trafficker or the person purchasing, they can be held on the procurement. So if the victim chooses to disappear, they still have something that's tangible to go after these guys, and make that trail of more or less the legal system having a trail of what these people are doing. And then that helps with more situations. But right now it's almost not even worth anybody doing anything about. Plus you have where the person who's purchasing, the person who's selling the person, and the victim are all lumped into the same categories. And so all with the same thing, where it could be that the victim is truly a victim and isn't doing anything on purpose or on their own. And so we're trying to remove that and separate that out as well.
I want to bring Bob into this conversation, but before I do, Sheila, and I haven't had a chance to tell you this, I did reach out to the House Judiciary Chairman, and we spoke very briefly over text about this, and he was not the chair when this bill last year when it was brought in, and this is held under a criminal part committee, not other judicial committees. I get that. He made a comment, quite frankly, that he didn't know where it was going. He made a comment, though, that he said the safe harbor bill did come about, and he was wondering, did that do somewhat the same thing that this 145 wants to do? Can you speak to that?
Sure, Mike. The safe harbor bill is a bill that provides certain rights to victims of sex trafficking. It gives them an affirmative defense. So if I'm being trafficked and I commit a crime, prostitution, or I engage in trafficking, but I'm doing it at the behest of the trafficker, I can claim an affirmative defense and saying I did it because I was being forced to I was coerced into it.
Right.
And if I should commit a crime while I'm being trafficked and I have a criminal record, I can appeal to the courts once I'm out of the life and say I want my record expunged. So the Safe Harbor Act does that, and we were trying with the Safe Harbor Act to expand on those rights, the affirmative defense. And what happened when it came out of the Senate, it eliminated the rights to an affirmative defense and having your record expunged for adults. So if you commit a crime, if you committed a crime as an adult, you couldn't get it expunged. Well, the law already provided for that, so they're taking away rights that are already in the current statute, in the Trafficking in Persons law. So when it reached Beth Bernstein's subcommittee, the probate and family law subcommittee in the House, we asked her to amend the Senate bill and put those rights back in. And she did. She did a wonderful job. We brought in a senior prosecutor from the AG's office, and she testified. One of our colleagues from Charleston testified, and a victim who had been trafficked from the age of 14 to 32. And she had a criminal record that spanned both her minor years and her adult years. And she had a criminal record, and she had it expunged under the current law. But if the Safe Harbor Act had passed the way the Senate amended it, those rights would have been taken away from adults. So we amended the law, the bill, and put the rights back in. So to protect the rights of the adults and not take them away. So that was our contribution there. The organization that I work with is an association of nonprofits like Fresh Start Healing Heart. We represent all the nonprofits in the state that provide restorative services to victims of commercial sex. So, and we did that, about 3-4 years ago, because we realized that individually, a nonprofit doesn't have the same clout that if we can organize together. So we have formed an association into the legislative roundtable, and that's the organization. So Safe Harbor, I'm happy to report it's back in the Senate, because it came out of the Senate, was amended in the House, went back to the Senate, and I'm hoping that with the remaining 3 days that we have in the Assembly, that it will pass and will restore the rights that they tried to take away from adults.
So, when I was talking with the Judiciary Chair, he's
a good guy, I like.
Yeah, absolutely. He had made a comment about some people who are against Senate 145.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Made me think, trying to, develop the entire story. Who and why would someone be against 145? I mean, they aren't in favor of trafficking, are they?
No, of course not. And Sheila hit upon it. The dynamics of commercial sex have changed. There's the internet. It used to be back if you look at the history on the bill, its first historical reference is 1942. Could you believe that?
Wow.
And the last time it was amended, as Sheila said, was 1986. And it was, well, first of all, let me say that commercial sex is a business. So let me ask you a question. What happens if the customers stop buying the products or services to the business?
Well, you either get rid of you change products or move somewhere else.
Well, if you're talking, they go out of business. And so we call the S-145 the Demand Reduction Act. And I personally have been working on this bill for 9 years. In the last 4 general assemblies, and every assembly, it passes the Senate and dies in House Judiciary. And I don't think it's because the representatives in the House are for bondage, human bondage. I think it's because they don't understand the changes that have taken place in the criminal enterprise. If you if you look at the law the way it's currently structured, it includes prostitution and solicitation. So you got the seller, the buyer, and then you've got the procurer or the pimp. So you got the three major participants in commercial sex, and they're all considered to be the same violation. So they all have a fine, whether you're a procurement, which would be a pimp, a buyer or a seller, which would be the victim as we see them. You get the same fine of up to $200. And that was the law of the land until 2012. In 2012, at the Attorney General's behest, the state of South Carolina passed trafficking in persons.
Yes.
And that addressed, and it's a very good law, it's a very strong law, but it addressed the supply side. It didn't address the demand side of commercial sex. It didn't say boo about the buyer. So the buyers are still being dealt with through this law that was crafted first in 1942, last amended in 1986, 38 years ago, with a fine of up to $200, which is Sheila said, that doesn't provide much incentive for law enforcement to work the crime because it's an expensive crime to work. So why is that? Why won't the House pass it? And I think that the law was built on the notion that commercial sex is a criminal transaction between two consenting adults, a buyer and a seller. And if they're equally consenting, they're equally culpable. If they're equally culpable, they deserve equal penalties. So that's why you have a law that says the buyer and the seller, and they've included in South Carolina, the person doing the business operator, the procurement, the pimp, all in the same statute, and they all carry the same penalty. Now, the pimp is now covered under the trafficking in persons law, but the buyer and the seller are under the prostitution law, and it's based on this notion of equal consent. Well, that may have been true in the past when prostitution was the dominant venue for commercial sex, but that's changed in the 2000s. The dominant venue for commercial sex is now sex trafficking. Sheila can tell you that. Almost everybody that engages in commercial sex on the victim side, the seller side, is being trafficked. I've got data that says that 85% of the people that engage in commercial sex are being trafficked. So, and if trafficking is the dominant venue, that really shatters the whole notion of consent. Yeah. You can no longer say that the buyer and the seller are equally consenting, since one party is coerced into it. And I think that in the House of Representatives, especially amongst people that are middle-aged and older, their view of commercial sex is traditional prostitution. So they said that what we want to do with demand reduction, Mike, is we want to assign prostitution to its own section of the criminal code, separate it out, and freeze the penalty for the victims or the seller at a current rate, and then have procurement and solicitation in a separate section, and jack up the penalties on a solicitation. And so what you have to do first is separate. And if you talk to Weston Newton, he'll say the reason it's not being dealt with in the House Judiciary is because there's opposition to separation. And so they want to. I have to tell you that I thought that we could increase the penalty on solicitation easily, but we'd have to also increase it on the victim. So I've asked people like Sheila, what would you say if I said we can increase the penalties on solicitation, but also we have to increase it on the victim? And Sheila and others have said, if you increase the penalty 10 cents, we're telling you to walk out of the room. You can't support it. So we're hung up on the issue of separation. Talk to Weston. I like Weston Newton. I think he's a good man. But I think that, like a lot of people in the House, especially the middle-aged and older men, they're hung up on this notion of traditional prostitution. And they say, they're equally consenting. If they're equally consenting, they deserve equal penalties. Well, that was true in the 1980s, maybe in the 70s. But today it's not, because the people are being trafficked. And that's the problem. And we need help. We need your help, Mike, educating Weston and the other leaders in the House to understand this change in dynamic, that the law that governs the demand side of commercial sex no longer comports with reality.
Do you, either one of you can answer this, do you believe that there's enough deterrent in South Carolina to prevent or to slow down sellers and buyers? Is there enough deterrent to go?
I think it's a joke, Mike.
It's a joke.
It's laughable. I mean, a fine of up to 200. I went to the dump the other day with my pickup truck, and I didn't tarp my load. So there was a law enforcement officer there, and he was gracious. He gave me a warning, but he said, if you do it again, it's a fine of up to $1,000. Wow. And I'm thinking, okay, if leaves blow off of my load when I'm, or whatever, and I can get fined $1,000. But if I go out and buy sex and exploit and demean and degrade and humiliate another human being, that's a fine of up to $200.
Well, on
That's
top,
crazy.
yeah, on top of that, the national average is $100. That's just the average, $100 a service. Okay. So here's the other situation. You get a situation where a victim gets caught up in this raid or whatever, and then gets let out. Now he's just going to make her earn it back for him.
Mm-hmm.
And so when it's so simple like that, it's a slap on the wrist. He or she who is trafficking don't even care. They know they'll make it back in an hour. Not a problem. So it's nothing. But then when it takes thousands and thousands of dollars for man time to fight this crime, it's not going to happen.
So
it's really there is no deterrent to our law. Our law ranks third from the bottom.
Wow.
In nationwide, and other states have dealt with it, and they've handled the separation business. Like Texas just recently made a first offense for solicitation a jail felony.
Mm-hmm.
Florida in 2019, first offense for a prostitution is a misdemeanor of up to $500, Florida. But for solicitation, it's a fine of up to $1,000, and the second offense is a felony. You've got a lot of states that add on an additional fine for solicitation. The law still says that there's, the solicitation prostitution is the same, but there's an extra surcharge for solicitation of up to $1,000 in some states. Maine, for example, they handle the separation issue, and I don't agree with this, but it just shows you that states are dealing with it. They said that they decriminalized prostitution, but they jacked up the fines on solicitation. So they said, we don't want law enforcement going out and arresting people that are selling themselves, because a lot of them are men now too, and boys. So
it's survival.
We want to focus law enforcement on the buyer, because if you don't diminish, if you don't deter people from buying commercial sex, and right now I think law enforcement has basically stopped working the crime. As Sheila said, I mean, I'm sure they're doing it, but they're not like they used to before the pandemic. Before the pandemic, they were working it with some aggression, but now it's like it's not even on the radar screen. And it's like hanging a sign out at the borders to our neighboring states saying, "Y'all come."
Yeah, absolutely. This is one of those topics, and I like to look for topics where I don't want to call it low-hanging fruit, but I'm going to call it that, where this is not a political football.
Oh, it's not.
That's got nothing. This should be even Steven. Sounds to me like we need to get the right House reps, plural, in your all's in front of you to go through this and get some, get some attention to get that pushed through the House. And oddly enough, I happen to have some of those contacts. So
I want to make an appeal to you then.
Yeah.
And that if we're going to get this law passed, then we have to. I mean, we're tied with Mississippi and we're ahead of West Virginia, and the rest of the states, are all ahead of us. So, going up to $1,000 will put us a fine of up to $1,000 about in the middle of the pack of the 50 states. And even that, I don't think that's good enough.
That's not good enough.
What little bit I've done at listening to Sheila and being around, at some events and other things, $1,000 to that crowd, for the most part, that's,
it's not a deterrent, but it's better than 200. Let's put it that way. But here's I want Weston Newton, who I happen to think is a good guy. I mean, I think he's a class act. I really do. I just think he's misinformed. And if we can somehow educate him so that when the next assembly opens, he'll be the primary sponsor in this bill.
That would be a blessing.
I will. I'll be glad. Again, he is a friend of mine, and we talk. I don't agree with everything Weston does or says, and that's good because he feels the same way about me, I'm sure. But I will set with him. I'd like to also probably there's a couple other House reps that have some influence on things like this, and that would really get wrapped around the effort of saving children, women, and men too from being trafficked. So I will take that up. I was getting ready to say something.
If you could talk to Weston, we really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I firmly believe, and Sheila, one day I would really, work yourself out of a job, so to speak.
I would love it.
That thought, Mike, let me just leave you with one last thought, and that is, as long as the money's on the table, as long as the sex buyers are putting money on the table and it's not being diminished, there will always be a supply, and that the pimps will go out and they will recruit and coerce young women and young boys into commercial sex, and they'll be handled. They'll have a life of bondage of the worst kind you can imagine. Right. So what we have to do is take the money off the table, which means we've got to deter. And I will tell you that SLED is doing wonderful work on the supply side. They're going after the traffickers with both feet, and they are really an elite law enforcement group, especially the human trafficking unit. But we need to go after demand, and trafficking in persons doesn't address demand, it addresses the supply side. The demand side is still being handled by this archaic law that was crafted in 1942 and last amended in 1986. That's unacceptable.
Yeah. Let me ask you all, and we're running out of time, but one of our viewers just made a comment, and he must have been thinking what I am. So we have talked about buyers and sellers, the debits and all that. Anyway, but when you look at the children side of this, or the women, and that's where I kind of, I look at women and children. What do we need to do to, curb the amount of material, if you will? Yes, I'm sure some of them are smuggled in from, across the border. Some are runaways. Are there programs, or is there, I know, Sheila, you have access to, places where these victims can go, but how can that be ramped up to eliminate the number of victims? That would be great. But keep them from being harmed or murdered.
I wish I could say there's an answer for that, Mike, but the problem is like here in South Carolina, majority of human trafficking is familia. So you're talking family. And so that's a really stiff thing to break and stop, especially if it's generational. But more education, being able to talk more, having more conversations. We do our I Stand conference, which works on boundaries and healthy relationships and what they look like and what they don't look like, trying to break the stigma and open communication. And we'll go and do that anywhere. We've done them in youth groups, schools, homeschoolers, community events. We've done them all over. We'll do them anywhere. Somebody just gives us a call, we'll set it up, we'll go do it. But when you have it being done, mostly the US is our citizens. And then you have it breaking down to South Carolina, mostly being familia.
Wow.
That's
tough.
It is. But if we can start to deter, like Bob was talking about, it might help to break that down. And then I really believe we will have other avenues to start ripping it apart more. It's got to start though with everybody calling up legislation, their representatives, and letting them know that they've got to support these kind of bills. I mean, we're on here talking about only one. I know Bob could talk to you about three. And it's one of those things that we just all need to stand up, stand out, and speak loud. And that's really going to help to bring the light to it for everyone in some way or another.
Couldn't have said it better. How can people get in touch with you or Bob, or however? What's the best way?
There's a nonprofit in every section of the state that, Sheila's down in Beaufort County, and then you've got Doors to Freedom in the Charleston area, the Formation Project. In Richland County, you've got Lighthouse for Life. In the upstate, you've got Switch and Jasmine Road and Rivers of Justice. So we're all over. I mean, just give us a call. Give any of those nonprofits a call. But
you can reach us at freshstarthealingheart.org. We have a link through there that you can get us, or call us on the phone from there. Bob, does the Legislative Roundtable have a website or a Facebook page?
No, we don't, because we really only deal with each other.
Right.
We don't have a website. We're not a nonprofit. We're an association. But you talk about children, and the sex buyers are becoming really, really perverted, more so than you would ever believe.
It's terrible.
They are the customer, and you've heard this. The customer's always right. Well, the customer in this case is demanding younger and younger victims.
Yep.
To the point that 85% of the people that called into the human trafficking hotline and volunteered their age of first exposure, 85% they were first trafficked as minors.
Wow.
85% say were first trafficked as minors. And that's not an accident. That's because the traffickers, the pimps, are doing what the customer wants. And the customer is increasingly getting perverted and sick.
Yeah.
So law enforcement's got to work the crime.
I put the website on there. Sheila, is that right? freshstarthealingheart.org?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right. Folks, those folks, and we've got people in other states watching. So whether you're in South Carolina, North Carolina, New Mexico, wherever, go to Google and find trafficking folks that do things like Fresh Start Healing Heart, whether it be centers, or what else would they look for, Sheila, if they were to Google it?
You could even look for just human trafficking organizations.
Yeah.
They can also contact us, because we actually have ambassadors in other states, and we branch out anywhere. So anybody that wants to even connect with us, we can help them get trained and work their area for us as well.
Or call the state task force, Mike. If you call the state task force, they can direct you to a nonprofit, because they have all that information.
Yep.
Folks, I certainly appreciate you being on here. You've given me some marching orders, so yes. I'm going to take care of that for you. I think to make it easier, I'm just going to point them to Sheila, and Sheila can get you involved, Mr. Healy, however you want to. And let's see if we can't get some leaves shaken off the tree.
Oh, I
hope we appreciate it. Thank you so much, Mike. Right.
You guys are always welcome. Thanks for being on here.
God bless you. Thank you.
Wickedness and filth this world has to offer.
Yeah. Rock music that shatters your bones. Big Patriot Radio.
That's some serious rock.
And you're responsible.
All right. So, yeah, I'm going to leave that up on the page there. Go check them out, freshstarthealingheart.org. Again, we take that very seriously. And, when you think about it, if you can do one little thing to save just one kid from being pimped out, or save one female who, for whatever reason has nowhere else to go, and is sold into sex slavery, whatever the situation, all these things lead. There is a line from drugs and alcohol, the prostitution, the trafficking. There's a big tie together. So whatever you can do, whether it's donate your time, donate resources, or just become involved and, hand out flyers at their events or whatever. Fresh Start HealingHeart.org. They will absolutely appreciate your help.
Locked and loaded.
Let's go.
Big Patriot Radio. Blues, news, country pop, and classic rock.
All right, so that's going to do it for this week. Next week, I'll be back in the studio and just found out today two things. One, one of the Beaufort County whistleblowers has decided to back off. And I totally respect that because that's a big deal. That's a really big deal to be able to put your face on that screen and say, this is what's going on. I totally understand it. Wish they had, whatever. On the other hand, also found out that we have another one. And this one is, it's not as big as Eric Greenway, former county administrator, but right there with him. Another whistleblower, we're getting some things worked out. We want to have that person on soon to tell their story. Apparently they are just fed up to hear. We want to learn more about it. Check us out at bigpatriotradio.com. All the podcasts are on there pretty much 5 nights or whatever it is a week. Go check them out. Bigpatriotradio.com. Find us on X, Twitter, YouTube, right here on Facebook. We're everywhere. We're everywhere. Thanks a lot for joining us. Can't wait to see you next week. Good night, America, and watch your six.